Hello, bonjour, que soit. Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation about the research on the value of public funding for Indigenous arts and cultures. This project was a collaborative effort between Archipel Research and Consulting and Canada Council for the Arts. The results of the research, along with the Council's response, can be found on the Council's website. We would like to convey our heartfelt appreciation and gratitude to all the participants, as well as the advisory circle convened by the Canada Council for the Arts, for the contributions to this research and this presentation. First, just a little bit about Archipel. We are Indigenous-owned and women-led, comprised of qualified Indigenous facilitators and researchers who bring sensitivity, flexibility, lived experience, and ethical rigor. We have years of cumulative experience facilitating conversations and answering important research questions about Indigenous and Canadian society. In all of the work that we do, we acknowledge that Indigenous community members, elders, and knowledge keepers are the experts in their lived experiences.
Our approach to conducting Indigenous research. There are four main aspects of Archipel's approach to research, including sustainable research. This means ensuring that research is relevant and creates a reciprocal relationship between Archipel research participants and partners. Indigenous involvement. This means including Indigenous people in all aspects of the research. Accountable work. This means that Archipel is accountable to research participants, fostering transparency and relational accountability. Lastly, Indigenous sovereignty. This means recognizing and incorporating Indigenous self-determination, worldviews, and governance in the research approach. Through the embodiment of these principles, we aim to honor the worldviews of Indigenous people, acting with ethical responsibility and sensitivity. This presentation includes several sections. First, we will share an overview of the project, including context, methodology, and demographics. Next, we will provide an overview of the findings of the report related to Indigenous community and arts and culture, the value of public funding, and accessing funding opportunities. Lastly, we will discuss the impacts of these findings in the final sections. The final report was developed by Archipel Research and Consulting Incorporated as part of a national research study conducted in collaboration with the Canada Council for the Arts on the importance of arts and culture to Indigenous communities and the impact of public funding for Indigenous arts and cultures. The overarching purpose of the project was to better understand the importance and role of arts and culture to Indigenous communities, the impact of public funding for Indigenous arts and cultures, ways to strengthen the relationship between Indigenous peoples and public arts funders, and how to improve access to public funding for Indigenous artists, cultural carriers, elders, and communities. The final report summarizes the findings from interviews, focus groups, and an online survey conducted across Canada from August 2020 to September 2021.
It is important to consider the historical relationship between Indigenous peoples and Canada. This relationship is characterized by forced cultural dislocation, relocation, assimilation, oppression, violence, and attempted genocide. This slide presents a timeline of past seminal reports that describe inequities experienced by Indigenous peoples in Canada. It has been 56 years since the publication of the Hawthorne Report, 26 years since the release of the report of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, 15 years since the United Nations adopted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, 7 years since the release of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission final report, 3 years since the publication of the report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, and 1 year since the Bill C-15, United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, passed the Senate and received royal assent in Canada. Many have worked to address the inequities between Indigenous peoples and settlers. This research is a contribution to that effort, focused specifically on the arts in Canada. This research was guided by Edawatamunk, a Mi'kmaq methodology and framework known as two-eyed seeing. Edawatamunk involves starting with the Indigenous ways of learning and knowing, and combining it with the Western or academic way, using both for the benefit of all. Engaging in two-eyed seeing is a hybrid approach that allows researchers to combine the value of both Indigenous worldviews and Western academic principles. The essential principles of Edawatamunk are mutual research interests, identification of required tools, research co-development, community validation, shared recognition and co-benefits, and long-term relationships. The Indigenous Advisory Circle oversaw the research and offered feedback throughout the process. The participants in the research included artists, organizations, and arts funders. Participants were engaged through interviews, focus groups, and a survey.
Instead of breaking down the regions for this project by province and territory, as is typically done, Archipel chose to approach it through the boundaries of Indigenous regions. So you can see on the map here that this really transcends provincial and territorial boundaries with how Indigenous nations and regions are spread out across Canada. This research aimed to reach three main groups. First, Indigenous applicants and recipients of Canada Council's programming. Second, Indigenous artists and cultural carriers with publicly accessible information. And lastly, other Indigenous artists and cultural carriers identified through personal networks. Participants included Indigenous artists, Indigenous organizations, cultural carriers, and elders. In total, there were 124 interviews, 15 focus groups with 112 participants, 413 survey responses. Throughout the project, we sought to include diverse Indigenous voices. 73% of participants were First Nations, 8% Inuit, and 19% Métis. The demographics were relatively consistent across the interviews, focus groups, and survey participants.
During the research process, participants unanimously expressed that arts and cultural practices are deeply interwoven with the Indigenous ways of being. Participants explain that the benefits of Indigenous arts and cultures include language revitalization, community building, storytelling, and cultural continuity, among many others. The vast majority of participants expressed the role spirituality plays in their artwork. They shared that their art was a way for them to connect to land, ancestors, community, ceremony, the dream world, healing, and honoring of the self. Ultimately, participants found that learning these skills and traditions becomes a way of life. One participant noted, quote, "My work is guided by my ancestors. I don't create work to please people. I create work because it is a reflection of my experience, of how I need to do work to uplift and move and heal what I'm connected to." End quote. Great Lakes region participant. In all aspects of the research process, artists expressed how public funding is integral to the success of Indigenous artists. Many artists spoke of how public funding allowed them to undertake meaningful artistic or cultural work that they otherwise would not have been able to do. Many artists spoke of how their experiences with the council had improved over the years. Among more established artists, and those who had been working in their field for several decades, participants were pleased to see an overall shift in the makeup of juries and leadership positions at the council. Over the years, they have seen more Indigenous representation on the council's juries and in leadership positions, which they felt was a positive step forward. One participant stated, quote, "If I were to start to reflect upon the last 10 years, I think the council are doing a much better job of inclusion through a number of their grants, including the Creating, Knowing, and Sharing program." Region 9 participant. While the report highlighted many positive impacts the council has had on Indigenous communities, many expressed that there is still room for improvement. Throughout the research process, participants acknowledged numerous barriers that prevent Indigenous artists from accessing funding for their art. Themes related to areas of improvement for funding included capacity for smaller organizations to apply for funding, funding requirements, gatekeeping and professionalism, barriers for remote communities, need for language support, community support and relationships, identity and funding. As one participant said, quote, "I don't know how to do a 500-word essay on my project. I know I need 4 moose hide. I know I need canvas. I know I need 20 sets of beads and thread and needles. But to explain the process of all of it and drag it into a 500-word essay? These applications are just another part of the colonization process." Region 12 participant.
The Canada Council for the Arts and other arts funders have a critical role to play in supporting Indigenous arts and cultures. 4 themes emerged from the research regarding the responsibilities of funders. Ownership. Within Indigenous worldviews, ownership is a collective stewardship and responsibility rather than an individual right. Collective rights extend across generations. Those who steward Indigenous arts have cultural obligation and culpability. Funders can support Indigenous communities by adopting concepts of ownership that encompass these worldviews. Accountability. Throughout the research, participants spoke passionately about the desire to strengthen relationships between funding agencies and Indigenous artists and communities to develop accountability. Indigenous artists, community members, and organizations have insisted on the need for arts and cultural strategies to be community-based to ensure that Indigenous communities benefit. Awareness. When building relationships with Indigenous communities, it is important to understand their histories. This is a step that all agencies and organizations must undertake. Developing this awareness among funders is important for improving support for Indigenous artists. Relationship. It is important for relationships to develop between Indigenous artists and art funders. Participants want to know those who work in funding and feel supported by them. This research illustrates the breadth and depth of the impact of public funding for the Indigenous arts and cultures, as well as some of the gaps that need to be addressed. Based on these findings, a series of recommendations for the Council were made, which are summarized in the following slides. To promote collaboration, community connections, and ongoing relationship building, the Council should develop partnerships with Indigenous communities and organizations, develop mentorship opportunities, and increase support for Indigenous arts administrators.
In regard to supporting the North, the Council should develop distinct funding for rural and northern arts organizations and artists, develop a partnership for delivery of funds, address cultural and regional realities of remote and northern communities. To further the protection and support of Indigenous languages and cultures, the Council should provide support and additional funding for Indigenous language and resilience, expand funding criteria to include Indigenous language translation, develop funding mechanisms for cultural activities. To improve funding mechanisms, the Council should further clarify Indigenous eligibility requirements for funding, better support emerging and exploring artists and organizations, include capital investments for artists and organizations, ensure that as many applications from applicants as possible are funded.
To improve accessibility, awareness, and outreach, the Council should create a user-friendly application and guidelines, improve awareness and understanding of, and education about the Council's programs, improve accessibility of the web page with a focus on guiding applicants, create a system for offering feedback to unsuccessful grant applicants. To affirm Indigenous rights, reconciliation, and decolonization, the Council should work to answer all arts and culturally related calls of the TRC and UNDRIP. Advocate for the timely integration of UNDRIP at all levels of government. Advocate for the answering of all calls to action from the TRC. We encourage you to visit the Canada Council website for more information about the research, including the Canada Council's response. You may also contact research@canadacouncil.ca if you have any questions about this project.
Walaliok, Hutta. Thank you. Merci.